Hello, my name is Thomas Spata, and I am presenting my EDA-707 Anchor Assessment, the curriculum evaluation. Part 1 was our comprehensive data dive, and I chose to evaluate our mathematics. So Tates Creek's school student population summary, we have about 1,700 students in grades 9 through 12. And we have academies at our school. So all freshmen attend the freshman academy, and students 10th through 12th, they pick an academy. They can be in the MES Academy, which is Medical Emergency Services, the Design and Engineering, the IB IT Academy, or the B Academy, which is the Business and Education Academy. Every student picks courses that are related to their academy along with their core classes. So all students still have to take 4 years of math. And that's one reason that I chose to evaluate that data. The racial breakdown of the student body is 43% white, non-Hispanic, 28% African American, 18% Hispanic or Latino, 7% 2 or more races, and 3% Asian. About 10% of the students are EL, English learners at Tates Creek. 5% of the students receive special education services through the IEP program, and about 12% of the students have been identified as gifted or talented. And you can see the data breakdown here, which was downloaded off of the school report card website. So in 10th grade, students take the KSA, and that was one of the metrics I used to evaluate how Tates Creek was doing with mathematics. Over the past 3 years, Tates Creek has seen a decline in overall proficiency on the KSA math assessment. In 2021 and 2022, 42% of the students scored proficient or distinguished. That number dropped to 26% in 2022-23 year, and then it increased slightly to 32% the next year in the 23-24 year. Despite the rebound in the proficiency rates remain well below initial year's performance. So we're hoping to see even more of an improvement from last year's data. When you desegregate by subgroup, the data reveals an ongoing substantial equity gaps. So white, non-Hispanic, and Asian students consistently outperformed the rest of their peers, with white students reaching 44% proficiency in 2023 and 24. African American, Hispanic, and Latino, and economically disadvantaged students scored below the school average, with African American students at just 15% proficiency in the most recent year. EL learners, English learners, had the lowest reported performance, with only 11% meeting proficiency in the 2023-24 year. And then students with disabilities, they were not in the data on the school report card. So there may even be more gaps in the data that's not being shown right now. So these results emphasize the urgent need for targeted data-driven instructional interventions, and continued equity-focused support for historically underserved student groups in mathematics. You can see the graph over here in the top right, and you can see the trends nicely with the different groups and the keys to the right. And then our data table right here, which is where the graph is generated from. And all this information was taken from the school report card that the state puts out. Okay, and I also used the 11th grade ACT benchmark metric, and that was a 3-year trend as well. And that trend was very similar to the KSA data. Over the past 3 years, Tates Creek experienced a notable decline in overall benchmark achievement. And in 2021-22 year, 32% of the students met or exceeded the benchmark, rising slightly to 39% in 2022 and 23, before sharply dropping to 20% last year. This decline highlights a growing need for targeted intervention and support across all student groups. When desegregated by subgroup, the data reveals persistent and widening equity gaps. And so we see a lot of the same trends. White and Asian students consistently outperformed other groups, while with white students achieving a 30% benchmark rate in 2023-24, African American students, Hispanic and Latino, and economically disadvantaged students scored below 20%, with African American students falling to just 10% in the most recent year. English learners showed a steep decline, dropping from 14% in 2022 and 23 to only 6% in the previous year. Students with disabilities remain among the lowest performing groups, with benchmark rates below 10% in all 3 years. So we were able to get the data for the benchmark for students with disabilities. So again, these trends emphasize the urgency for equity-focused instructional practices, particularly in mathematics, and the need to intensify academic supports for historically underserved populations. And again, to the right here, you can see the graphs and the 3-year trends. And notice how there was a steep decline in a lot of the groups, going from 2022-23 to the 23-24 school year, and our data tables where the graph is generated from. We also looked at math course failures, and when we say failures, we grouped F and D grades together. So it's not just Fs in this data, it's going to be students that scored a D and an F in the class. So over the past 3 years, Tates Creek High School has seen consistently high math course failures rates across its student body. In 2021-22, 37.4% of students earned a D or an F in math. That figure decreased slightly to 34.4% in 2022-23, and then before increasing again to 36.7% in 2023-24, showing minimal overall improvement. So the data shows a slight decline, but it's mostly flat. When desegregated by subgroup, the data reveals significant and persistent equity gaps, just like our KSA and our ACT benchmark showed. African American, Hispanic, Latino students had the highest failure rates across all 3 years, exceeding 41% in multiple years. Again, ELs, English learners, consistently showed the highest failure rates, peaking at 49.8% in 2021-22 and remaining above 40% each year. Economically disadvantaged students also faced elevated failure rates ranging from 36% to 42%. White and Asian students had the lowest failure rates, remaining closer to 30% across all years. And then students who exited EL status demonstrated significantly better outcomes than current ELs, but still struggled compared to non-EL peers. So if we can get students to a point where they exit the EL program, they do significantly better than their peers that were in the program, but still they need extra support to reach kind of where the students that were never EL are. These trends highlight the need for intensified academic support systems, including differentiated instruction, early intervention, and data-driven strategies targeting students who are disproportionately at risk of failing. And again, like I said before, you can see our data, quite high failure rates, and this is DNF again. And then here's where the data or the graph is generated from our data right here. All right. Part 2, we're going to evaluate high quality instructional resources. So Fayette County, all high schools use the Savas Envision Math, which is does the algebra, geometry, algebra 2 sequence. And so Fayette County includes this specific, or including Tates Creek, uses this curriculum to provide high quality instructional resources in math to its students. The district pacing guides are provided for each class, and teachers are given autonomy to supplement the curriculum with other resources. This helps teachers support students with specific resources and high effective teaching methods that are unique to their student populations. And so each high school can kind of make some choices where they can pick some resources that can directly affect their student population that wouldn't necessarily help a different school's population. FCPS also utilizes Fayette County Public Schools Big Rocks to give teachers a list of big ideas that are essential to mastery of grade level content. And I've linked that in the PowerPoint as well, so we can look over that if we need to. There's also the High School Mathematics State Standard and Curriculum Alignment linked in here, and the coherence map to show the connections in Common Core standards. And then I have also linked the math link to our actual pacing guides. So if you click on this bottom link here, you'll be able to see each of the algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 pacing guides and kind of what's expected for each student in Fayette County to be successful. And most schools should be using, all schools should be using this sequence. We have a high student population that travels from school to school throughout the school year, so they theoretically should be able to go from one school to another and kind of end up in the same spot they were when they left their previous school. All right. Savas and Addition, Math, the Algebra, Geometry, Algebra 2. This is the Ed Reports evaluation tool. So we used the evaluation tool. Fayette County did not have their own, but they used the Ed Reports. And then a summary for Savas and Vision Math are summarized below on the 3 gateways. From the Ed Reports website, a meets expectations rating means that the material met quality expectations in most or all key areas. And so there are 3 gateways that were evaluated here. Gateway 1, which is focus and coherence. Gateway 2, which is rigor and math practices. And Gateway 3, which is usability. So focus and coherence shows a strong alignment to high school standards. It builds coherence across algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, and lacks consistent development of some standard clusters. And so that the curriculum received a 14 out of 18 for that, which actually still meets expectations. Gateway 2, rigor and math practices, was 15 out of 16. Excellent balance of conceptual understanding, procedures, and application. Mathematical practices, MP1 through MP8, are woven into lessons, and then there are authentic real-world math problems, which are included regularly. And that also met expectations. And then Gateway 3, usability, received a 30 out of 36. There are clear teacher guidance and accessibility pacing tools. Supports for diverse learners, including ELs and students with IEPs, and strong digital accessibility with editable and interactive features. And so the usability, specifically stating ELs, providing supports for ELs and students with IEPs, is the district's way of trying to use data to target those students and help them be more successful. All right. So I also evaluated the math curriculum for culturally relevant programming, and Fayette County's curriculum did not do as well being culturally relevant. So we used the CRSE STEAM scorecard evaluation, and that was conducted on all 3 of the programs or the classes. And Algebra 1 emerged as the most culturally responsive course with an average unit score of negative 1.8. Negative numbers are not good. We want positive numbers. So it's the most culturally responsive course. That doesn't mean it is culturally responsive. Primarily due to real-world applications in its data and statistics unit. So in contrast, both Geometry and Algebra 2 lack culturally inclusive content, equity-based applications, or identity-reflective tasks across most units. While all 3 courses are academically rigorous, like we saw in the last slide, and align with standards, they lack embedded support for culture relevance and would benefit from intentional integration of diverse perspectives, community issues, and teacher tools for culturally responsive instructions. And I have broken down the summaries of each class below. You can see Algebra 1 is the most culturally responsive, but it's still just partially, and the rest are just not culturally responsive. And so there's plenty of room for growth there in Fayette County and their math resources. Part 3, we are actually going to evaluate the school's MTSS process and programs. So what is MTSS? That's just the multi-tiered system of support. This is pretty common in most schools. So the objective is to appropriately support student learning and behavior at Tates Creek High School. So this applies to academic and behavioral supports. There are 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the lowest tier. That's the core classroom instruction. Tier 2 is targeted small group instruction. So those students have been identified and can be grouped together and given support that way. And then Tier 3 is the intensive individual intervention. And students spend a certain amount of time at each tier and given certain supports to see how they respond to it. And then schools make decisions based off the data from there, which we're going to go through in the next few slides. So at Tates Creek High School, our MTSS process timetable. So Tier 1 support is 2 weeks of SLC documented Tier 1 support. If no improvement after 2 weeks, they move to Tier 2. So at Tates Creek High School, we have SLCs along with PLCs. Because we're an academy school, we have small learning community meetings, and that is once a week for 30 to 60 minutes a week. And a large portion of our meeting is focusing on the specific students in our academies. And so each academy does that. So every student is a part of a small group, which is Tier 1 supports as well. So we get to know our students really well because we all see the same students for the most part, and we can talk about these students at the meetings and more effectively help them. After 2 weeks, if there's no improvement, Tier 2 support is given, and so that is 6 weeks of SLC documented Tier 2 support. And so if no improvement after 6 weeks, we move to Tier 3. And then we still continue the other tier supports. Obviously, a student's going to be in class, so they still have to have Tier 1 support, and we can even offer some of the things in Tier 2 as well. Tier 3 support will occur for an unspecified amount of time and according to the severity of the issue and response to the support. And we'll go into more detail about each of these tiers and what can happen for how long. So Tier 1 support, it's specific to the academic or behavior needs of the entire class or school. So it could be both. And so 2 weeks minimum before moving to Tier 2. And if students don't make progress in the 2 weeks, they'll require additional support. Either we're going to modify Tier 1 support or they're actually going to move up to Tier 2 depending on if we think that's appropriate. Specific students can be documented in SLC, and so that's what I was saying. Our small learning communities, we have lists that we keep for students, and we talk about each student that we feel like is a potential candidate for Tier 2, and we talk about things we can do at the Tier 1 level to prevent them getting into Tier 2. If we can support them at the lowest level, that's best for everybody. And then PBIS is Tier 1 support. About 80% of the school should respond positively to Tier 1 support and not have to move up into Tier 2. Tier 2 support is designed as an added support to identify Tier 1 issues. So if we're providing those Tier 1 supports and they're not working, Tier 2 is a great way to kind of hone in on specific groups of students or individual students and change what we're doing for them. And so 6 weeks minimum before moving up to Tier 3. And if they don't make progress after 6 weeks, we can change the support they're getting or we can recommend for Tier 3. Student specific, the entire class will not receive Tier 2. So we will talk specifically about these students and it won't go for the whole class. The things that we're looking for are measurable academic or behavioral goal statements. And then goal statements could be based upon skill deficits as well. So a lot of our students that reach Tier 2 are deficit in skills that would make them successful in certain classes. And so we try to give them support specifically to work on those skills and improve so that they can be successful at the whole class setting. We still give them Tier 1 support, and about 15% of the students will receive Tier 2 support at Tates Creek. So after Tier 2, we move students to Tier 3 support, and that is the highest level support for academic or behavior issues. Student specific, and the entire class will not receive Tier 3. So measurable academic behavior skill-based goal statements are required. Students who did not make progress could require additional support, either modify Tier 3 support or recommend for special education or alternative placement. And that is alternative placement is a last resort for us. We really try to help students in our building. Tier 1 support continues, and about 5% of the school will receive Tier 3 support. And this is just a summary again of the timeline going about the total weeks over it. So Tier 1 is about 2 weeks. Tier 2 is 6 additional weeks. And then after about 8 weeks, you can get referred to Tier 3 support. And that there's no specific time limit. You have to be in Tier 3, and there's no max that you can be in Tier 3. It's just specific to the student and the SLC decision. And a lot of times that's the academy principal at that point, and our behavior specialist or academic specialist making those decisions. So SLC documented Tier 1 plans should start after the teacher had time to identify students who are not responding to the 1 to 2 weeks of general Tier 1 support. And so we will talk about these students in our SLC meetings for multiple weeks before we actually move them to Tier 2. And the teachers will brainstorm, and we'll try to come up with solutions and supports that'll help those students, preventing them to get into Tier 2. Tier 2 plans should start after 2 weeks of SLC documented Tier 1 support. Documentation is a big part of this. And then Tier 3 plans could start after 6 weeks of SLC-based Tier 2 support plans. And then students with previous support plans can move through this process faster. So if the student has previously gone through this process and has dropped back down to Tier 1 with the rest of the students, and then has kind of elevated either academic or behavior issues, we can bump them up a little bit quicker instead of waiting the weeks, because we know where that situation could be going. And then we have some lists here, how we document students and keep track of them throughout the SLC process. And this is just examples of behavior examples of how a student might move through our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 support. And it follows the same timeline. We do the 1 to 2 week, or the 2 weeks in Tier 1, 6 weeks in Tier 2, and then students get moved up to Tier 3. Same thing for the academic example here. We move through the same timeline again: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. All right. So I compared Tates Creek's MTSS process to the Kentucky MTSS framework. And these are the MTSS components that were evaluated. We have tiered support structure, universal screening, database decision-making, progress monitoring, intervention selection, documentation and tools, family and student involvement, cultural and equity lens, and then integration with special ed. And so in this second column here, this is what the Kentucky MTSS expectations are from KDE. And this is how Tates Creek is implementing it. And the fourth column here shows if Tates Creek is aligned to what the expectation is. And you'll notice that most of the categories we are aligned in, except for a few. And so we'll kind of go through them. So the expectation for tiered support is a 3-tier prevention model: Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tates Creek fully implements that. We have our 3 tiers, and we have our time limits that we go through it. Universal screening is recommended. It's conducted 2 to 3 times per year for all students in academic, behavior, and special ed learning. At Tates Creek, behavioral Tier 1 screeners use PDSA support lists, and then it's not explicitly said on how we do academic screeners. And so we are partially aligned with the recommendation for that. For database decision making, teams meet regularly 6 to 8 weeks using data protocols to adjust interventions. And in our SLC meetings, Tates Creek, we do meet weekly. And then we talk about students in Tier 2 bi-weekly. And Tier 3 is a 6-week cycle for us. So that is strong alignment. Progress monitoring is recommended that there is frequent bi-weekly or weekly for Tier 2s and 3 using valid tools. And we actually do monitor students by the recommendation. We will often go above bi-weekly. We'll monitor students in Tier 2 weekly sometimes. And then Tier 3 review every 2 weeks. And we have spreadsheets, and I've linked them in the previous slides that we use. Intervention selection is it's recommended we use evidence-based interventions matched to the student need. And so at Tate's Creek, we use our RTI strategy list used to guide teacher support selections by environment, in-person, digital. We're all in person at this point. And so we generate ideas and supports for students that we think will be effective from those lists. Documentation and tools, consistent forms for referrals, tracking, and team decisions, what recommended. And we have an extensive documentation process at Tate's Creek. It's all digital for the most part. And so if somebody needs access to it, that's allowed to have access to it, it shouldn't be a problem. Family and student involvement. Families are partners in decision making at each tier. And so we actually don't specifically talk about family role in documentation of MTSS. And we presume involvement in Tier 3 planning. But we oftentimes have a lot of parent and teacher communication at the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 level. It is something we discuss in our SLCs. We do want to make communication home, because we know that's one of the best ways that we can help support students, by getting that other perspective and getting support when they go home as well to support us what we're doing in school. So we do have quite a bit of documentation, whether it's phone calls. This year it's Parent Square, so emails are all options. Cultural and equity lens. Systems should reduce disproportionality and be culturally responsive is the recommendation. And we actually don't mention it in any of our plans or planning tools. We do have we used to have yearly equity trainings, but there's no targeted training or equity process visible in our documentation. And so we are not present on that component. Integration with special ed. MTSS is distinct from special education, supports general ed first. So MTSS should be a separate process than special education. And so SPED students reviewed case by case at Tate's Creek. They have their own case managers, and it's not something we specifically target in our SLC meetings. We focus on all of the students, not just SPED students. And so MTSS used when concern not addressed in an IEP. And so that is aligned. So areas of growth for Tate's Creek, making academic screeners like MAP and their use more explicit, including culturally responsive strategies and equity safeguards, and then increasing family voice and visibility in the process. Okay, so we are going to evaluate the school's database decision-making process for part 4. And so we have our CIP rubric components again. It's Tier 1 instructional planning, common assessments, data review protocols, reteach and Tier 2 instructional planning, and then PLC structure and documentation. So for Tier 1 instructional planning, Tate's Creek does a plan, do, study, act model using school-wide in the PLCs to plan instruction tied to standards, supports equity and instructional consistency, strong alignment there. For common assessments, we have along with our SLCs, we still have weekly PLCs, and PLCs identify and align common assessments using district frameworks. Assessment timelines and planning are embedded in agendas and PD slides, so strong alignment. Data review protocols. So in our PLCs, there's a heavy focus on data. And so that is one area of growth for us. So it's something that's going to be very prevalent in our PLCs this year, and our trainings already for the in-service training. PLCs formally meet once a week and conduct a 6-week data cycle to analyze CFA and benchmark results. Data informs whole group or Tier 2 reteach planning and strong alignment. And then reteach Tier 2 instruction planning. Data guides decisions on whether to enrich, reteach, or recommend Tier 2 support. Process for adjusting instruction is embedded in PLC expectations and strong alignment. And then for PLC structure and documentation, Tate's Creek's evidence for that is all PLCs set schedules, norms, and roles. Documentation includes a master PLC agenda and PD slides referencing district PLC focus areas, the Plan, Do, Study Act, and assessment and equity. Strong alignment. So how effectively Tates Creek High School uses documented school-wide process for these 4 things. And then areas of growth, culturally responsive practices are noted, but there's no clear documentation of equity-based root cause analysis or how families are engaged in the PLC process. Data reviews focus on proficiency overall, but don't always dig into subgroup trends or barriers. And then reteach lessons are planned but not stored in a shared location for school-wide access and long-term use, which could really help other teachers access that information and those good lessons and save time from recreating things that are already made. And then PLC agendas reference data review, but don't always connect back to student work, analysis, or evidence of impact. Part 5, we're compiling a summary of findings. So there are persistent achievement gaps among the African American, Hispanic, EL, and students with disabilities. They consistently score below peers in math proficiency, ACT benchmarks, and course grades. So a recommendation for that would be implement targeted tier 2 and 3 math interventions, which would be academic interventions aligned to the high quality instructional resources for these subgroups with frequent progress monitoring. High quality instructional resource strengths, but limited cultural responsiveness is another weakness. So Envision Math aligns well to standards, but lacks consistent integration of diverse perspectives and equity-based practices. So a recommendation for that would be revise lesson materials to include culturally relevant examples, provide teacher PD on equity-based instructional strategies. Our MTSS structure is in place, but lacks equity focus, which is a very common theme through a lot of our processes. Processes exist, but equity-based root cause analysis and family engagement are inconsistent. So the recommendation would be to embed equity analysis into MTSS data reviews, involve families more directly in intervention planning. PLC processes active but missing cultural and equity components. Regular data discussions occur, but cultural responsiveness and community voice are limited. We can add explicit protocols for equity review and PLC agendas, include cultural relevance checks when planning instruction. And then our last finding here, data-driven culture. Staff use common assessments and review results regularly, but interventions are not always adjusted in real time. So a recommendation would be to increase frequency of subgroup level data reviews, adjust instruction, and support immediately based on the trends. And so the summary of findings is essentially the same thing I just read out of the chart there. All right, so part 6 is our 30, 60, and 90-day plan for math goals. And so we have 2 math goals. By the end of the 24-25 school year, Tates Creek High School will reduce the percentage of students who score novice in math as measured by KSA. So our objective is that 40% of students will score or less will score novice in mathematics as a measure by KSA, and we're currently at 45%. So the key core work processes, 2, which is design and deliver instruction, is one of the strategies. Also design and deliver assessment literacy, and review, analyze, and apply data results. Some of those activities could include professional learning, instructional strategies, instructional coaching, instructional strategies with PLC focus on review, analyze, apply data, and then results. And then PLC focus is assessment alignment. How we're going to measure, we'll use KSA math scores and then the district common benchmark assessments. And for progress monitoring in December, January time, and March and April, we will analyze district common benchmark assessment scores in Algebra 1 and Geometry, and we will analyze KSA math scores from the most recent year. Goal 2 in 24-25, 44% or less of African American students will score novice in math as measured by KSA, and the current level is 49%. So we are going to reduce the percentage of African American students scoring novice in math from 49 to 44%. We are going to use those key core work processes, design and deliver instruction, design and deliver assessment literacy, and then review, analyze, and apply data results again. The same activities: professional learning, instructional strategies, instructional coaching, instructional strategies with a PLC focus on review, analyze, apply data results, and then PLC focus would be assessment and alignment. How are we going to measure that? Again, we're going to use KSA math scores and then the district common benchmark assessment. And we're going to have the same progress monitoring because we're going to use the same tests. So here is a detailed outline of the first 30 days, next 60 days, and the final 90 days. So within the first 30 days, the actions and activities will conduct baseline data review of the 23-24 KSA and district benchmark results, and desegregate data by course, teacher, and subgroup to identify high priority skill standards. We're going to provide professional learning on cultural responsive instructional strategies and formative assessment checks, and initiate PLC cycle focus on aligning first common assessment to the KSA rigor. People responsible: we're going to have the admin team, the math department chair, which is also our instructional leader, and PLC leads. Measure of success: again, we're going to use the baseline data report, first PLC common assessment aligned to the KSA standards. After the first 30 days, the next 60 days, we'll implement instructional coaching cycles, targeting identified novice level skill gaps. PLCs review first common assessment results, identify misconceptions, and plan reteach lessons. We're going to monitor subgroup progress with formative and interim assessment data, provide teacher feedback on strategies implemented in class. That'll be instructional coaches, which are our instructional leaders. They are our department chairs, and our PLC teams. How are we going to measure? Documented reteach plans and student work samples, improved interim assessment results for targeted students. And in the final 90 days, we're going to analyze district common assessment, our common benchmark number 1 data, overall and African American subgroup, adjust tier 1 instruction, and plan targeted tier 2 supports based on results. Continued PD focused on assessment literacy and cultural relevant problem context. And we're going to share progress with staff and set mid-year targets for reduction of novice performance. And so we're starting to get into that academic tier 2 support after 90 days, when we can get a good baseline of data. Admin team, the math department, the PLC leads, and even the instructional leaders will be responsible for that. Benchmark: how we're going to measure success. Again, benchmark data shows reduction in novice rates compared to baseline, and the evidence of aligned reteach lessons and subgroup gains. Okay, and that was my presentation. I appreciate you listening, and have a great day.